Hello, welcome to the next episode of Window to the World, Okno do sveta. My name is Miroslav Wlachovsky. Last year I served as a foreign minister of Slovakia, and I currently work at Globsecu as a distinguished fellow. My today's guest is Spanish ambassador to Slovakia, Loreou Arribalzaga. Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miroslav. Thank you so much for having me here. Very pleased to be here with you.
Oh, absolute pleasure. I want to talk about Slovakia and Spain and our relations, and I want to get to know a bit more about our cooperation in a defense area. The defense is now overarching topic in Europe because of the Russian aggression to Ukraine in February 2022, the ongoing war for more than 2 years. And your soldiers are coming or are already here in Slovakia. So why did Spain decided to help us, and why this will be probably the biggest contingent of Spanish soldiers outside of Spain, if I'm not mistaken?
If I may go back a little bit, I mean, to put this into the context of our bilateral relations. Actually, the commitment was made by Prime Minister Sánchez, was announced in a NATO summit in Vilnius in 2023 to deploy Spanish troops in Slovakia in the framework of the NATO enhanced forward presence in the eastern flank. And it happened in the year where we were commemorating the 30th anniversary of our bilateral relations. Yes. You were commemorating 30th anniversary of the Slovak Republic, of the constitution of a Slovak Republic as an independent state. And I really think that this decision, and it's placing us into a context, I mean, where our bilateral relations are really moving onto a new level, not just in quantitative, but also in qualitative terms. Let's say that for the previous 3 decades, we had friendly bilateral relations. But as we were mentioning, as we were commenting before we actually started recording, I mean, Spain and Slovakia are actually at opposing geographical ends of the European Union, which means that we have friendly relations which were mostly related, I mean, to 2 fields. On one hand, it was the field of education, the teaching of Spanish. We're doing many things, the most relevant of which is probably our bilingual section program that started in 1990 in Nitra, and that nowadays covers 7 bilingual sections in gymnasiums all over the country. We are currently, I mean, 1,200 students are attending those 7 bilingual sections. We're talking about students that when they finish their studies, I mean, they not only gain the maturita, but they can also obtain the equivalent Spanish title, the bachillerato. And then the second main axe of our bilateral relation in these past 3 decades had been the presence of Spanish business in Slovakia. Mm-hmm. We have nowadays around 60 Spanish firms that are registered in our commercial office. Those cover all kinds of firms. We're talking from smaller ones to bigger ones. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Going to the bigger ones, our presence has been mostly related to 2 clusters. Public infrastructure. Spain, I mean, has very important, internationally important firms working in that sector. And mostly, the second and most important cluster is the automotive industry. Naturally. You know that our 2 countries have very synergic, I mean, economic tissues or productive tissues in this respect. Actually, last year, I mean, the last figures I saw about our bilateral trade, more than half of our bilateral trade was related to automotive. I mean, sector, either finished or components. So that had been the biggest pillar of the 2 biggest axes of our relations, so to speak, for these 30 years. But for most part of those years, political and defense matters were being treated mostly at Brussels in the framework of our shared membership of both European Union and NATO. And that's what has now, to an extent, and relevant extent, changed with the decision, despite the fact that it was also taken in the framework of NATO. But it's going to open, I mean, a big field for our bilateral relation. So going back to what you mentioned, how was the decision made? I mean, you said all this happens, I mean, in the framework of NATO, adapting itself, I mean, to the changes of in the geostrategic, in the security landscape in Europe as a result, first of Russian illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014. Then, I mean, NATO starts developing its defense and deterrence posture in the eastern flank, developing its enhanced forward presence in the eastern flank. And Spain has been quite committed to this presence in the eastern flank from the very beginning. We were present in Latvia. We are participating in the Baltic air policy. We have also been present in the Black Sea, in Bulgaria.
But
so
you send the planes there, yeah?
Yeah.
But this time
but we also had, in Latvia, we also had an important contingent of people stationed there, yes? So we were, I mean, committed from the beginning. And then full-scale invasion of Ukraine started February 22. So then the Brussels summit, NATO summit, decided we're going to create 4 new battle groups in the countries of the eastern flank that do not have battle groups, one of which was Slovakia. Then at Madrid summit that same year, we held the summit coinciding with the 40th anniversary of our entry into NATO, which took place in 1982. It was decided, I mean, to size up and change the size of those multinational battle groups into brigades. And then the process started within NATO, I mean, of searching who was volunteering, I mean, who was in a capacity to offer forces and to offer to commit as framework nation. And it was in that process that Spain offered that we would commit as framework nation of a multinational brigade. In the new regional plans that were approved in Vilnius, I mean, there's a region that comprises, I mean, Hungary and Slovakia. Spain offered to be a framework nation for that region. And after a number of visits and contacts, it was decided that Slovakia was the best, I mean, the best location to deploy that. And I have to say that one of the factors that was important in us making that decision is the receptiveness on the part of the Slovak authorities. Of course, I mean, we are offering, I mean, to help our allies.
Very much.
And I have to say, and I think it's important, I would like really to underline this. I mean, in the past, starting 2023, in the past months, I have been in close contact, constant contact with the highest ranking officials of our armed forces. Spain has a really important commitment with sending troops abroad. On average, we have 3,000 military outside Spain. We're currently participating, this year we will be participating in 16 missions abroad in 4 continents. And that might be within EU, UN or NATO framework. And those high-ranking officials, who are people who have very experienced and have a lot of, I mean, have participated in a relevant number of missions abroad, they have told me that they have been amazed at the receptiveness they have encountered here. I mean, from the Slovak armed forces. So it is not me, as Spanish ambassador to Slovakia, who is supposed to say nice things about Slovakia,
all right,
but it is the highest ranking officials in our armed forces telling me that they have been really, they're thrilled, I mean, at the availability they have encountered in our Slovak counterparts. So that definitely helped, I mean, the decision.
And it's really good to hear. It's very pleasing, and I must say that I myself visited your ministry a couple of months ago, and I had the same feeling. So we are talking about roughly 700
yes,
troops?
Yes, exactly. So you know, we're now, I mean, the biggest group is stationed in Leszcz, but we also have a smaller group in Kuchnia, and so. Referring to Leszcz, actually the deployment will be completed tomorrow. We have started, I mean, we have gradually started deploying, because, as you know, it's not just, as I mentioned, it's not just bringing the troops in those big numbers. As I told you, I mean, 780 out of 3,000, it makes 26%. So 26% of our deployment abroad will be located in Slovakia. But we offered to take up as framework nation. We're taking over as framework nation from the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
So during this first semester, in agreement with our Czech allies, we have been gradually deploying while they were, reducing the presence while they were leaving. So we started deploying our effectives, in January, and last group is arriving, tomorrow. So we will be roughly around 780.
Yeah, and the whole brigade will be under Spanish command.
That will be the case. So the next big appointment we have here in our calendar is July 1st, which is the date where we will be taking over the command of the multinational battalion, scalable up to brigade from the Czech Republic.
Yeah. No, I want to thank you for this, because I think it's very important not only for defense, but also for our understanding how NATO works and how nations which are member states of NATO help each other. And you always recognize friends in the time of crisis. That's when the people come to your help, and I'm very thankful that Spain decided to come to Slovakia and to strengthen our defense. But this is one part of our cooperation. I also know that we strengthen our cooperation in defense industry, because, well, you need troops, but you need to give them ammunition, and you need to give them tools. And when we look at Ukraine, this is the part of the biggest problem there, is that the lack of ammunition vis-à-vis the Russian aggression. And we in Europe, we need to produce more, basically. We need to strengthen the capacities of European defense industry. And as far as I know, there are also good examples of cooperation in the defense industry between Slovakia and Spain. We have some company in Spain which is doing quite well.
Absolutely, yes. Actually, that investment, that Slovak investment by MSM, took place before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine happened. It was 2020 that MSM acquired the shares of Fábrica de Municiones de Granada, so Granada Ammunition Factory, that was previously owned by GDLS Santa Bárbara Sistemas. This is a very emblematic company for Spain. Actually, last May, it celebrated its 700th anniversary, which is,
wow.
Yes, it's quite impressive. I myself, when I read it, I was thinking maybe I'm mistaken. I thought I had because first I heard it and I said maybe I'm mistaken, I don't recall properly, so I checked it, but it seems there are some Arab chroniclers from 1324 reporting about the producing of gunpowder in 1324 in Granada.
Wow.
So yes, and as I was saying, MSM made this investment, and in recent times it's the most relevant Slovak investment in Spain. Which is a reason we're happy about. Initially, they had a concession, to work until 2026, but after the full-scale invasion started, the company saw the possibility for them to contribute significantly to EU's plans, to the European Union's plans to support Ukraine by sending ammunition. This required for them to engage in some investments to expand their productive capacity. And for this, last year, they requested the Spanish Ministry of Defense to get an extension of the permit they have to be producing. So that was negotiated, and they got a 10-year permit that is extendable, for a similar period. It can be prorogued. So I think it's definitely that's another factor that is going to be of much help. We have seen the way this the impact this has had in our bilateral relations. We have seen it immediately. Just going back to the month of May, we had at the beginning of the month of May, our Minister of Defense was here, visiting Lech. She met with Minister Kaliňák, who accompanied her during the whole visit. And then Minister Kaliňák traveled to Spain on 30th of May. I have to say we are very thankful that he kept the date of the visit, because that had been planned before the attack against the Prime Minister.
Yes.
And we are very thankful that, I mean, despite the critical situation and the tasks that the Vice Prime Minister had to take upon himself as a result of this
assassination attempt.
Yes, exactly, of the assassination attempt against the Prime Minister, he still maintained his plan to visit Spain. So the ministers met, and we spoke not just about the deployment, about a whole number of other areas. We spoke about air defense. We spoke also about the possibility of exchanging good practices in other fields, such as the participation of the military, helping the firefighters. When there are summer fires, we have an issue with summer fires because of climate change and droughts. And you have been sending, Slovakia has successfully been sending, effectives to other countries and assist with that. So now there's many things are moving. And if I may go in briefly back to the question you were posing me about the reasons why Spain chose to come here. During your tenure as minister, you have had the opportunity of attending some NATO Foreign Affairs Ministers meeting. You know that one of our main ideas in NATO is we push for a 360 degrees approach to security.
Yes.
Which means that it is important to bear in mind for us also the risks of the threats to security coming from the south.
Yeah.
But I think, for us, it is important to be consistent. If we are prone in these 360 degrees and we approach and we want our partners to understand, the threats that are in our immediate vicinity, we feel that we should also, despite the fact that geographically we are distant, so distant from Ukraine, we still feel involved. This goes also, this should also be added to the fact that we understand that what's happening in Ukraine goes well beyond Ukraine itself. We understand that what's now, being put into question is the multilateral rules-based order and the principles of the UN Charter. So, what's at stake here is really, as a challenge for all of those where we are included who believe in a multinational.
Exactly. It's
order.
not just about the fact that one country was attacked by another, but it's biggest challenge to international order in a way that Russia broke several international laws and commitments. So yeah, that's it. And you mentioned that you have this 360 degrees approach. Today or this year we celebrated the 20th anniversary of Slovakia's entering both NATO and EU, and I remember at that time I was in Washington D.C. at our embassy, and people asked me, "How do you remember that?" And my answer is that just before that we started to be invited to the meetings of the European Union, and what I remember was that the amount of information tripled or was 4 or 5 times bigger than before. Suddenly there is a need for a mental change when you think as a European that it's not about only your borders, it's about much bigger borders, it's about European borders. So now you have to think about borders in Greece, in Spain, in Nordic and Baltic. That's how truly European should think about the whole area, because it's our common project, it's our common defense, and so that means that we should learn more about your cooperation with Africa, for example. You said that if you want to be consistent with 360 degrees approach, you have to think about eastern flank. For us, that means that we have to think about Africa and about Middle East and about some other parts which Europe is connected to. So I wanted to ask you about what's going on in Africa. How big challenge is that for Spain? Because when I was recently in Madrid a couple of months ago, we discussed it quite in length with at the government office that Africa is one of your priorities naturally. What are the main issues in that relations with Africa? How we should think about it?
So, actually, yes, you were mentioning the need to cover a number of just to look beyond the confines of Europe. I mean, you know, the case of Spain, in this respect, is as all countries. I mean, our foreign policy is conditioned, I mean, by our history and geography.
Absolutely.
So in the case of Spain, geography and history have made us be a European country, of course, but we're also Mediterranean. You mentioned, I mean, we are bordering with Africa. We do not only have sea borders, we also have terrestrial borders with Africa as a result of Ceuta and Melilla, our autonomous cities, I mean, in the north of the continent. And we are also an Atlantic country and therefore an American country. The fact that Spain is an American nation, that is taken. That's a quote from a speech. I mean that King Philip VI delivered in Harvard before he was actually king, while he was still a prince of Asturias. And I would like, I mean, just to make here brief mention to the fact that today we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of his proclamation of King Philip. It's been 10 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Of his mandate. Yes, I was reading some of the polls and really, I mean, I would say a big number, I mean, more than two-thirds of the Spanish population think that he has positively contributed, I mean, to the stability of the country and to the, I mean, onto the prestige of the institution. Actually, the king has an important role in the Spanish constitutional system in the field of foreign relations, because it says, I mean, the constitution says that he has, I mean, he or she, by the time we will have a queen, hopefully, has the highest responsibility in the highest representation of the state in foreign relations, and mentions especially with the nations of our historic community, which goes to also Latin America. You were asking me first about Africa. So Africa, as you said, yes, it is a priority for us. It's not a region with which I have been involved personally in my career. You know, I mean, I have worked mostly with Latin America and Europe. The structural challenges in the continent are many. You know, I mean, it's climate change. I mean, there's food insecurity. In the region that is most, I mean, that's the biggest priority for us, which is the Sahel, Central Sahel, and Western Africa. We saw last year, I mean, it was again during your mandate as Minister of Foreign Affairs, we were seeing last summer, I mean, all the backlash in terms of democratic development in the Sahel. I mean, we had a number of countries that had been previously making good progress, I mean, in democratic elections. Those processes being held, I mean, and military coups taking place.
Yes.
So
several military coups in that part of Africa.
So the pandemic and the war, I mean, the war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, have increased some of those problems. For instance, food insecurity. Last week, I mean, during the peace summit in Lucerna, in one of the I mean, there were 3 working groups. I mean, Spain participated in the food security one. It's a topic close to our heart. And the Prime Minister was mentioning how in 2023, I mean, the number of people who were subject to severe famine was around 280 million in the world. I mean, that was 24 million more than in 2022. So all those problems are self-compounding. There's also a presence, I mean, in the Sahel, a presence of terrorism. They're also leading to migration flows. So it's a complex situation.
Plus, there is a completely different demography development in Africa and in Europe.
Absolutely. I was going to mention that the demography was saying not everything is, I mean, not all the factors. There are also some positive factors, I mean, in this otherwise concerning picture, I mean, economic dynamism and the demography that you were mentioning. I mean, their pyramid is very different, so they have, I mean, a lot of young people in Africa, which we will need in Europe, according, I mean, to the evolution of our demography.
Yeah. I have heard that there is a strong migration pressure in Isla Canarias, so that we are in a half a year, and there are already as many people as they came last year for a whole year. So the migration pressure is amounting, and we as Europe we have to find answers how to deal with it, and how to help Africans stay in Africa, to create the conditions for that. You mentioned those military coups. Well, if you have that kind of instability, and if you have a famine, and if you have a demographic challenge, it's natural that people move from place to another place where they basically believe their life will improve. So that's that's it. You know. So you mentioned also Latin America. That comes natural with a Spanish history and Spanish language, and what we seen in a case of Russian aggression in Ukraine, that we had a challenge with what is called nowadays Global South. We as a Western Europe, what should we improve in a communication and in relations with Latin America? I know that during your EU presidency, you organized a big summit. After several years, I think it's more than a decade, there was a summit of EU and Latin America. I think it was one step in the right direction, but probably not enough yet.
Many topics. I mean, I don't know whether that was a question or a series of multiple questions. I see at
probably.
Least. I see at least. I mean, so I mean at least three. So specific solutions to Africa. Migration, I mean, migration pressure in Spain, and then Latin America. So if just for the sake of continuity, I will talk a bit more about Africa, about what we think that can be done. I mean, to contribute, solve the problems, but also to take advantage of the opportunities. At the bilateral level, we're working on a strategic, a new strategic framework, trying to set a partnership based on an equal, on an equal level, based on a equality approach for this partnership. Also at the EU level, I mean, we do have many tools. We have, the EU African Union partnership is an important one. In that respect, we believe, and we're happy to see that it has already been announced that the next, I think it's the 6th EU-UA Foreign Affairs Ministerial will take place under Hungarian presidency, so which we are starting, next month.
Yes.
And also in the 6th summit of the EU-UA partnership, in the 3rd summit, sorry, it was agreed that a significant package of investment. So it was 150,000 million to be invested, euros to be invested in projects in Africa. So there are things that we are doing there. Then another aspect that is important, and you were mentioning it in regard to Latin America, but I bring it here for Africa because I think it's very important. It's strategic communication. And I think it's also important to mention it here in Slovakia, where you have been at the forefront of calling EU member states' attention on the issue of disinformation.
Absolutely.
So,
we have a huge problem there. And
so we need to make an effort. The European Union needs to make an additional effort, to change the narratives. We have seen that happen. Those crises we were referring to, in the Sahel. It is important, to improve our strategic communication so that our African partners and their citizens, mostly their populations, will know, what the effort, what the European Union is contributing to Africa and to their development. So that on the African side. As regards the Latin America, and then I will leave migration for the end, if that's fine for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Latin America, yes, as I told you, and you know that because we have already spoken about that in other occasions.
You said
that's kind of a thing particularly close to my heart, yes, because I served there. I mean, most of my career I've been dealing with either Europe or Latin America. So I served there, and I've also been at our headquarters at the ministry in Madrid, following Latin American.
In which countries, if I can ask?
Yes, of course. So my first posting abroad was Costa Rica for years, from 2002 to 2006, and then I moved on to Ecuador from 2006 to 2009. So I spent my first 7 years serving abroad in Latin America.
I would love to serve in Costa Rica, but unfortunately we closed our embassy there just in the time when I joined the ministry.
So what I have seen, I mean, when I get those questions, it produces a kind of melancholy, you know, in me, because I get the feeling melancholy, let's say, / frustration, because I see we have been dealing with the same kind of theoretical questions within the European Union, but we have trouble into putting them into practice. So from 2015 to 2017, I was at our headquarters, and I was actually directly involved following relations between the European Union and Latin America and the Caribbean in Madrid. And we were already saying all these things that we have. I mean, we have global challenges.
Yes.
Climate change, migration. That was before the pandemic. Yeah. And that we need multilateral answers to these global challenges, and that Latin America is the region that is particularly close to the European Union in the sense that they do share our view of a multilateral rules-based order. They have, I mean, they share our ideal of a social state, I mean, welfare state, of democracy, rule of law, etc., etc. Latin America is a very complex region, so then there are many different, but let's say, as a region, the region as a whole, so we know that. But then we really seem to have difficulty putting this knowledge into practice. You mentioned the summit that took place last year. Yeah. It had been 8 years since the previous summit. The second summit took place in Brussels in June 2015. And then 8 years went by without us having a new summit.
Yeah, what take us so long?
It is true, I have to say, because as I told you, I was directly involved. So it was true that it was the Latin Americans who asked us to postpone the summit in 2017, and that was a result of the developments in Venezuela. The crisis in Venezuela, there was, I mean, the Lima group, and I mean, the presidents of the Lima group, of the countries in the Lima group that were opposing the authoritarian derive of the regime in Venezuela, were not comfortable, wouldn't feel comfortable sitting with Nicolás Maduro. But that being said, I mean, that's one thing, but then we left another 6 years go by without meeting. So you ask me, what do we have to do for them to understand us better? We have to engage, and we have to understand them better. It is hard, I mean, we see it also, I mean, it's very clear at the human level, I mean, at the human, individuals level. If you ask someone else for empathy or understanding, I mean, you're supposed to be providing that, because otherwise, I mean, it goes both ways. So our Latin American counterparts expect us to understand.
So we shouldn't go to them when we needed something.
Absolutely, exactly, because it's, I mean, and that works for everyone, not just for Latin America. Yeah. So what we have to do now is try not to let another 8 years go by without a summit. We agreed last year that we will have summits every 2 years, and in the years in between, we will have meetings of ministers of foreign affairs. Then another example that I find kind of frustrating, the Mercosur agreement.
Yeah, it's a big frustration.
Formal negotiations started in 1999, that is 25 years ago. In 2019, we had a principle of agreement, and then again we were halted.
What are the main obstacles? So, well, why it takes us too long?
So the main obstacles, I mean, there is takes two to tango. So sometimes the main obstacles have been in the side of Mercosur, depending on the political cycle. Sometimes you didn't have, I mean, Mercosur is you have the two biggest countries in Mercosur are Argentina and Brazil, which are two big countries. So sometimes they were not aligned, the governments between Argentina and Brazil, so it was hard to deal. But also we in the European Union, inside, there is a minority of countries, because we're talking about 3 countries, that are that have reservations, mostly based on environmental and agricultural concerns they're expressing.
Protection of the market.
To this respect, the fact is that after all this long negotiation, we have the current text, that's proposed, includes a very modern chapter on trade and sustainable development that we understand takes good care of the environmental and labor concerns. And the, as regards the agriculture, we believe that, as it was seen in the Agri-Fish Council in February, the concerns, the very legitimate concerns of the European agricultural sector that are not solely focused on Mercosur, but have, a wider spectre, are being taken into account. There was this commitment by the Ministers of Agriculture to, to review the common agricultural policy.
Yes.
We think, that Mercosur, 1 in 7 jobs in the European Union depends on exports. That's part. I do not know the number for Slovakia, but you're
probably
very
higher.
open.
Probably
you're a very
higher.
open economy, so I would say that is higher. And we're talking. Mercosur is a 260 million people market. We're talking about reducing 90%. The tariffs. So that would be. That would be really a huge. That would have a huge impact.
When we talk about Spain in Slovakia, we usually think about beaches and tourism and where to go there, and the summer season is coming. So, how big is the influx of Slovaks into Spain, and where to go? What are the best recommendations for a tourist season?
You asked me about a tourist, but I hadn't answered your question, and I don't know whether we are running out of time on another type of influx, which was migrants.
Oh, yes.
I don't know whether we have the time for me shortly to address that before moving into tourism.
Yes, we can. There are a lot of topics we can cover. Yeah,
of course. Perfect.
But migration is a big topic in Europe.
Okay, so yes, migration in Spain. So it's probably, Spain is very different, has a specificity in because in the past 20 years, starting since 2000, we have in the country from the 15 countries that were EU member states at the time that have had the sharpest increase in migration. We went from being a country that had virtually little migrants in 2000 to a situation where we have 18% of our population who are migrants. So we're talking about the level of Germany or Belgium. We're talking more than the Dutch, Denmark, Italy, or France.
Oh,
and that has happened in a much shorter period of time.
I see.
In 2000, our population was 40 million, and now we're talking about 48 million inhabitants, and that's due to migration, because in terms of, if we leave aside migrants, our demographic evolution, the growth, the vegetative growth is negative, unfortunately. We have, the fertility rate and natality rates are lowering. That's the overall framework. So we do have a very strong presence of migrants, 18%. And currently, what's the pressure? Where do we have the biggest pressure? You mentioned the Sahel, the Canary Islands. That's very much the case. That's a result of the geostrategic crisis that the region is experiencing since last year. The figures for the Canary Islands, so far this year we have seen an increase. Practically the flows have tripled from last year if we compare to the similar period last year. We also have another important source of migrants, or income, because they're not properly migrants. It's difficult, is asylum requests. Spain is now 3rd in asylum requests in the European Union, behind Germany and Italy. These asylum requests in the case of Spain come mostly from Venezuela, Colombia, and Peru. So in the end, most of them are not granted. So we're talking about actually people who turn out not to qualify as I mean, to get, yes, exactly, to be granted the status of migrants. So those are, I mean, those are the figures. In terms of what we think it is important to do about migration, as I said, first, Europe needs migration. I think there's a request, I mean, there's a study research by the International Employers Organization and the European Commission that says, on average, 75% of EU employers have trouble finding the talent they need.
Yes.
You know the problem in Slovakia very well.
Yes, yes, and we had several debates here in this studio about the need for legal migration and to allow workers coming from other countries, because our factories, our entrepreneurs needs them. It's as easy as that. But there is an important distinction between legal migrants and illegal migration.
For Spain, regular, orderly and safe migration, because we cannot, is a priority. And I say safe because we cannot forget, and that's I mean, that's a primary concern of our politics, is we're talking about people here. I mean,
yes,
who are entering, we're talking about people, we're talking about men, we're talking about women, we're talking about children who have rights. So that's a primary concern. That's a priority of us. What we understand is very important. I mean, from the external, we've just reached a political agreement during our presidency on the Pact of Asylum and Migration, during our temporary presidency of the EU. On the external dimension, we think it is very important to work with countries of provenance. We were talking about Africa. We have to work with them to provide additional sources of development for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
People
keep them there if
people,
possible.
I mean, like you were mentioning there, I mean, if I may quote you, I mean, people just want to have better opportunities for themselves and for their children. I mean, if the situation is very hard, I mean, if we were in their position, we would be doing the same.
We would move. Yeah.
So we have to improve.
As
I mean,
we did in history.
As we did in history. I mean, Spain was a country of, I told you, I mean, for us it's a relatively new phenomenon. We were sending migrants. I mean, the 60s, 70s, a lot of Spaniards went to work to other European countries, to France, to Germany, to Switzerland, to Luxembourg. So we have a recent experience the other way around. So it's important to work in the preventive side. And then from the perspective of the internal perspective, we think it is, we have been talking about the concepts of responsibility, solidarity. We think it's also important to think about co-responsibility. It's not just solidarity. You were mentioning the European Union and NATO. I mean, when you're ally, it's a joint project. You were very, exactly. I mean, very accurately saying it, I mean, about the perspective, how you change your perspective when you entered EU and NATO. They now are also your borders.
Yeah, we should think in a different framework.
Exactly. So Ukraine, again, we're far away, but we have, I mean, granted a temporary protection status to 210,000 Ukrainians. So on the whole, we have 300,000 Ukrainians living regularly in Spain. We're the fourth country. We already had 100 before the full 100,000 before the full-scale invasion started, and now we have 310,000. So we feel co-responsible. It's not that we are solidary. We feel co-responsible, and that's the message I would like, I mean, to mention.
Sure.
Regards migration, tourism.
Now the destination. Now the.
Yes. So, you know, Spain is, I mean, is a very...
How many of us invade you?
So no invasion. We're very happy. It's a tricky one, actually. So the latest figures I asked for, we have 150,000 Slovaks. And those are the figures for last year. But we know those figures are under real levels, because they're not recording, I mean, the Slovaks that are coming to Spain that are not living from Slovak airports. I mean, the Slovaks who are flying from Vienna, from Budapest, from Brno.
Yeah.
So that brings me to another issue that maybe...
and some of them driving there.
Absolutely. It brings me to another issue in which maybe, I hope that some private companies are listening to us, and maybe they will pay attention to that. I mean, we need to increase air connectivity, and I'm mostly thinking about Košice. I mean, direct flights from Košice. Bratislava, we have some flights, direct flights to prime Spanish tourist destinations. But in any case, I mean, if you're in Bratislava or Western Slovakia, you can accommodate with traveling through Vienna. But Košice is a different thing, so I hope we can increase our connectivity from there. So that 150,000 is very little, is under the actual figure. you're mostly traveling to our two archipelagos, Canary Islands, Balearic Islands, Catalonia, and Andalusia. So that tells us it's also mostly, sun and beach tourism, which is one of our attractions. We have 300 days of sun a year in some locations in the coast. And we have the biggest number of beaches that have been awarded this eco distinction, which is the blue flag by the European Commission. So we have a big number of those. But of course, Spain has much more than just sun and beach. That's accredited by the fact that we were the most visited country in the world last year. With a population, with a population of 48 million people, we received 84 million tourists.
Congratulations. We are running out of time, but there's one important thing. Which I want to raise with you, and that's that Junga last year, in 2022, Junga decided that the 24th June will be the day of International Day of Women's in Diplomacy. So congratulations to that. And I always admire my female colleagues. I know that for you it's at least in past it was quite difficult to race through the ladder, and the conditions are not equal. But I hope that we are moving in the right direction. So.
Thank you so much for raising the topic. Yes, I'm not sure I can share your optimism. Of course, if we look at our countries, our countries, figures are better. But UN Secretary General mentioned, the Day of Women in Diplomacy is just an opportunity to reflect, not just, on our position of women in diplomacy, but on how gender issues are considered in our day-to-day work, which is, there are two dimensions to it. To the internal dimension of women, presence of women in Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in foreign services, high-ranking positions, all that kind of things. What's the percentage of ambassadors, female ambassadors you have? Yeah. All these things.
But it's a long way to go in this country in that.
Yeah, we're currently at 26% in the case of Spain, 26 female ambassadors, 26% and 30% as regard the presence of women in the foreign service. But it's also an opportunity to think about how the work we do in foreign affairs, in diplomacy, impacts on gender equality. You know that Spain adopted in 2020 a feminist foreign policy. In this case, Sweden was the first country in adopting such policy. Germany and the Netherlands also have feminist foreign policies. In Latin America, Chile, Mexico, and I'm for sure leaving out a number of countries that I haven't heard of. But so that's a topic. We need to bear in mind the internal and the external dimension. And thinking of that, when I mentioned the fact you said, about it becoming better, I was I don't know whether you noticed last March 8th, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that at the current rate, we will need 3 centuries to achieve full legal equality between men and women, and that there is a risk for, regression, that in many parts of the world, rights of, it's not just a question of not making additional progress, but it is a question also of our rights.
Regrets.
Exactly, of the rights, that have been conquered to actually, suffer regression. So, but it is, there are some grounds for optimism in the sense that we have made a long way. But we cannot confound, we cannot let these results, these goals we achieved sedate us, because, this is a constant struggle, and it's a constant struggle not just for women. It's a constant struggle for men and women. There is a democratic, mandate there. After all, in the European Union, in Spain and Slovakia, women are 51% of the population, so it is hard to think that you have, full democracy if the rights of 51% of the majority of the population are not at equal level.
No, and it's not only about rights. It's about the very practical thing that you have to use the half of population in the proper way. You have to give them chance, because that means prosperity for your own society. It's quite natural. We just didn't tap on that resources properly. I used to ask my guests about some recommendation or kind of a book you can recommend to the topics we discuss. So what would be your recommendation for our viewers, our listeners? What book concerning international relations or Spain they should read?
So it doesn't go specifically to the topics, specific topics we discussed. It's more about international relations, and because we're heading, to the summer holidays, especially in Slovakia, because in Spain we start our summer holidays a bit later, mostly in August, but you're starting yours in July. I thought of recommending, two books, which are a series, same author, that make for a fun and light reading on the field of international relations.
Okay.
And I don't know whether I spoke to you already about them. These are a collection of writings by British ambassadors coming out of the archives of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. So the first one is called, the author that has compiled, this series of essays. They're not essays, they're actually, internal dispatches, by British ambassadors, is an author called Matthew Paris. He worked at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, I think, for a short while, and then he moved on to journalism. The first one is called Parting Shots, because for many years, British ambassadors were supposed to, when they were leaving a posting, they were supposed to write, a final document
sort of
on
a
how,
summary, how
yes,
they see the country,
exactly,
relations, everything.
That's how they saw the part. That's what they call the parting shot. So the first one is called Parting Shots. The second one has a very intriguing title, which is The Spanish Ambassador's Suitcase. Now we're talking about a female in diplomacy. It was not a female Spanish ambassador. It was a male Spanish ambassador, I think during Franco regime, that for some reason apparently was carrying a very big suitcase at a Homs trip in the Saharan desert. So that is, I like those books. There's a short, they're short texts. They're covering all kinds of, countries around the world. They're also stretching time-wise. They're stretching from the 40s, 50s, 2000. So they give you, it's a very good insight, into the world of international relations. They're short, so you don't have to read the whole thing. You can read a bit and then move on to other thing. And I think it's light. It makes for light reading. Also for fun reading. It's entertaining at the same time as it is interesting, and provides insight into not just how the diplomats view the countries where they're posted, but also sometimes on how diplomats are not too pleased about the decisions that their ministries are making towards them. And I think to some extent many of those might be applicable not just to the British Foreign Service, but to other foreign services that we know. Yeah.
I read partly the Parting Shots, and it's great fun. And and there are diplomats who says that sometimes you spend 80% of your diplomatic talents dealing with your own ministry and your own superiors. So, that's also mentioned.
I completely subscribe to the percentage.
Okay. So, thank you very much for this episode and for our debate, and I hope that we will meet again.
Thank you so very much. It was a real pleasure for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.